fitting, if you ask me. And on we go. Pope Francis is giving his blessing, really, to a new Vatican think tank, as if you haven't got enough jackasses, that is seeking to prevent the mafia and organised crime groups from exploiting the image of the Virgin Mary for their own illicit ends. Now, the Vatican's Pontifical Marian Academy launched the think tank on Friday at a conference titled Liberating Mary from the Mafia. This is almost as bad as the Muhammad cartoons. And it was a reference to the historic relationship between the Italian mob and the Catholic Church, and the popular displays of Marian devotion by mobsters in Italy and beyond. And in a message from the Pope read out at the start of the conference held at Rome's Museum of Civilizations, Francis said the religious and cultural image and patrimony of the Madonna must be preserved in its original purity. And he said any popular displays of devotion to Mary must conform to the message of the gospel, or gospel, and the teachings of the church, and that people participating in them must be true Christians who look out for others, and especially the poor. I'm going to vomit in a minute. Now, the Catholic Church in Italy has long been associated with the mafia, thanks in part to their post-war common cause against communism. While some Catholic priests have courageously opposed the mob and paid for it with their lives, others have been called to explain their celebrations of funerals, weddings, and other sacraments for mafia dons, acceptance of their donations, and participation in their religious processions. The Madonna, oh my, always represented in black, whether it's skin, garment, or the bead she carries. We'll have more on her in a later show. But I guess the church are now running out of funds, or the mafia is not sharing the funds with them anymore. Or perhaps it's just a ruse to deflect the Italian mafia was created by the church. Yes, the Vatican Church created the mafia for funding purposes related to gun running, drugs, prostitution, security, and child and sex trafficking. And the line, they must be true Christians who look out for others, especially the poor, certainly doesn't apply to that church. A British participant in AstraZeneca's fake virus vaccine trial was diagnosed with a serious neurological disorder weeks after her second dose of the inoculation, according to company documents this week. A previously healthy 37-year-old woman was hospitalized this month after receiving 2 injections of the pharmaceutical giant's new vaccine, where it was determined she developed transverse myelitis, which is a rare neurological ailment caused by inflammation of the spine. Though the report states the woman, who had not been identified by name, had no adverse reactions after her first dose in early June, she began to experience neurological symptoms some 2 weeks. It's always 2 weeks, isn't it? Half moon cycle is why, and an MK Ultra trigger word. After her second jab in August. Now, during a jog on September the 2nd, the volunteer had a trip with a jolt, the document said, while the next day she reported difficulties walking, weakness in her arms, impaired motor control over her hands, a headache, and reduced feeling in her torso. She was then hospitalised September the 5th and diagnosed with confirmed transverse myelitis soon after. Now, whilst I feel sorry for this woman's plight, the sheer crass stupidity of taking part in these trials is absolutely mind-boggling, and no doubt seduced by the lure of extra money or groceries that they do for these trials. And it's a shameful practice that these pharma groups, who in part are responsible for many low-income people, to then use their plight to guinea pig these people with known poisons. But it still doesn't fully account the stupidity of going for these trials with zero accountability should the trial go wrong. Is it worth your life, the meagre bribe these companies give you? A state of emergency was declared on Thursday in 8 regions of Greece, which were expected to be hit by a subtropical storm in the Mediterranean named Ianos. The gods again. The Medicaid, dubbed Ianos by the National Observatory of Athens Weather Service, and said it was in the sea area between Sicily and Peloponnese, and was expected to make landfall as a powerful storm across southern Greece on Friday, bringing heavy rain, flooding and gusty winds. It did, and it killed at least 3 people. Category 1 hurricanes in the Mediterranean. Is that normal? Add in a plethora of earthquakes in non-quake zones this past week, and storms covering most of the Atlantic, and the last 2 storms that approached America or landed in America that does 90-degree turns, and something is clearly amiss in these times. And when you add in what I warned of in a show maybe 18 months back of the takeover of all Gulf Beach and Ocean View homes from Texas to Florida and the Bahamas and the neighbouring islands, perhaps now the path of the latest steered storm Beta makes things become a bit clearer, does it not? The Justice Department said on Monday it has identified at least 3 US cities that have permitted violence and destruction of property and are now at risk of losing federal dollars as part of President Trump's effort to crack down on unrest fueled by incidents of police violence against black men and calls to defund police departments. New York City, no surprise, Seattle and Portland, Oregon were all targeted by the Justice Department as having refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract criminal activities, and that was in response to the violence that has erupted in those cities. Like I said, no surprise New York is involved, and the other 2 are related to SSP and Chinese Elders and Dragons operations, neither of which are connected to the Chinese government per se. House unable to Speaker Nancy Pelosi on Sunday declared that she did not rule out the possibility of impeaching President Donald Trump if he tries to push through a Supreme Court nominee to replace the frequent dyer Ruth Bader Ginsburg in a lame duck session. And it also emerged that Democrat Joe Biden's campaign and aligned Democrat Party committees entered September and the fall sprint to Election Day with $466 million in cash reserves. 466 million. Giving the former vice president a significant financial advantage over President Trump. Now, Team Biden's cash position released by his campaign Sunday night puts the Democratic nominee in his party about 141 million ahead of Trump's political operation, and it represents a sharp reversal from the opening months of the general election when Trump enjoyed a formidable financial lead. Now, the Government Accountability Office, which is Congress's auditing arm, said in a report on Monday that possibly 8.7 million or more individuals who are eligible for the economic impact payments have yet to receive those payments because of inadequate IRS and Treasury Department records. And it's not 8.7 million, it's a lot higher. The masters of repeated programs, like the bots they are. The impeachment didn't work last time. So let's try it again. Smack my head. And when will people see through all this madness? $466 million in cash reserves can feed thousands of people or get thousands of people off the streets instead of wasting it on a senile kiddie fiddler of an old man who's unable to speak for himself due to the onset of dementia. And yet millions of stupid people not only fund him, but vote for him as well. All because of the failed tribal party politics line. One wonders how many really understand the meaning behind Republican or Democrat. And one wonders if they did, how many would actually vote. The Pentagon this week was found that it redirected out the back door most of its $1 billion in pandemic funding to defense contractors who exchanged the money for jet engine parts, body armor, dress uniforms, and other military needs. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. The CARES Act passed by Congress in March granted the Department of Defense $1 billion to both prevent and get ready to respond to the coronavirus. But the Post reported that in the weeks that followed, hundreds of millions of the taxpayers' money was instead utilised to obtain military supplies. And this was a change from the intent of Congress, the Post noted. And meanwhile, US health officials are still requesting funding for pandemic response, including $6 billion for states to make vaccines available when they are developed and to address a shortage of N95 masks for hospitals. Perhaps they should go and knock on Jared Kushner's door or Gavin Newsom. You might get some. Now, the Pentagon has also requested that $11 billion be provided in potential new stimulus bill being debated by Congress. The Congress instructed the $1 billion in the CARES Act to go to Defense Production Act efforts, which permits President Trump to direct US companies to manufacture necessary products, such as personal protective equipment. Meanwhile, his son-in-law is blocking all the American companies who do manufacture it from selling any. And here we are 5 months later, and it still hasn't been addressed. Now, months after the funding was allocated, department lawyers concluded the money could be used for defense production, including projects that had little to do with responding to the pandemic. Smaller firms received more than a third of the funding for less than $5 million, but hundreds of millions of dollars went to several large companies. And I don't have to read out them, do I? At least 10 of the about 30 contractors awarded with DPA funding also received money from the Paycheck Protection Program. THI proving correct again, as we exposed this a long time back, and the links to these, quote, contractor, quote, unquote, groups. And basically what this is it's a look after the cronies and kickback exercise. And they are stealing the people's money with impunity in vast quantities. And this despite 4 years of Trumpster being for the people, we are told, and yet it's still ongoing. And it's about time these things were turned on these organised criminals and things, and the truth finally comes home to roost. Here comes